My name is Olivia Garrison, and 2 months after I buried the only father I've ever known, I stood in a courtroom holding the truth like a weapon. I handed the forged adoption documents to the judge, locked eyes with my stepmother Linda, and said, "You faked these to erase me, but I dug up what you buried. Before I take you back to where it all started, right at the edge of that casket, tell me where you're watching from in the comments below." This one's for anyone who's ever been lied to by their own family. Buckle in, they say grief is like a wave. But for me, it was more like a punch to the chest, followed by a slow suffocation. I was still reeling from the loss of my father, the man who raised me, taught me how to ride a bike, sneak peach cobbler before dinner, and drive on a rainy Atlanta night. The man who called me his baby girl every single birthday without fail. So when I stood there in the pew-lined funeral parlor of Westwood Baptist Church, clutching a damp tissue in one hand and my father's favorite tie in the other, I had no idea the real death I'd be mourning was something else entirely. Not love, not blood, but the illusion of family. The church was quiet but tense, like everyone had shown up for the spectacle more than the service. My stepmother, Linda, stood near the front with my half-siblings, Grant and Miranda, who hadn't shed a single tear. I was staring down at the casket when I felt a sharp tug at my elbow. "Linda, don't look so heartbroken," she hissed, low enough so only I could hear. "You're not even his daughter, so don't expect a dime." My breath caught. "What?" She didn't answer. She just shoved a manila envelope into my hands with red nails that gleamed like lacquered claws. Inside, folded and already crinkled at the edges, were adoption papers. Signed, dated, stamped, with my name on them. She looked me square in the face with a half-smile. "You might want to sit down for what comes next." Before I could respond, Mr. Greaves, the family lawyer, stepped forward near the pulpit like it was part of the funeral program. "With the family's permission," he said, voice smooth as marble, "I'll read a brief statement from the estate." I still had no idea what was happening. I looked around, confused. Surely this wasn't the time. But Linda gave him a nod like she was leading a corporate boardroom, not a funeral. Mr. Greaves cleared his throat and began. "The estate of William Garrison is hereby transferred to his legal children, Grant and Miranda Garrison, due to Olivia Garrison's status as a non-biological child and based on the enclosed documentation. She is not entitled to inheritance." I felt the room tilt. People turned. Whispers started. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my ears. The air had been sucked from the room. "Wait, what?" My voice was barely audible. Linda turned to the gathered crowd and made a show of putting her arm around Grant. "He loved Olivia, sure, but legally, she wasn't his. It's all here clear as day." Mr. Greaves added, "The papers have been verified." His tone was all business, cold, detached, like I was a clause on a spreadsheet. A few heads turned toward me, pity and curiosity mixing like cheap perfume. Grant was already talking about what he'd do with Dad's Corvette. Miranda was smiling. I was still standing, still holding that manila envelope with trembling fingers. He called me his daughter," I managed, but no one was listening. My father's body was 6 feet away in a sealed casket, and still somehow I felt more invisible than he was. The humiliation swelled in my chest. I looked at Linda again, who leaned in close enough for me to smell her perfume, citrusy and sharp. "You were just a project, a placeholder," she whispered, lips barely moving. "Now that he's gone, so are you." And then she turned away like I was already buried too. Later that night, I'd replay that moment again and again, trying to find the crack where reality split. But right then, all I could do was stand still, surrounded by people who suddenly saw me as a stranger. The man I'd called Dad was gone. And apparently, so was my place in his world. The apartment was too quiet when I got home. I dropped my coat onto the kitchen chair, kicked off my shoes without bothering to line them up, and sank to the floor like my bones had turned to sand. The manila envelope Linda shoved at me now sat on the rug beside me, like it had followed me home to finish the job it started at the funeral. The papers inside were spread out like pieces of a puzzle I didn't believe in. My name was there, typed in bold, legal letters, Olivia Dawn Garrison. Then, beneath it, adopted, finalized March 2, 1998. I was 7 years old that year. I tried to remember anything from that time, a courthouse, a conversation, anything. But all I could hear in my head was his voice. "You'll always be my baby girl." I reached for the adoption decree again, rereading it for the fourth, no, fifth time. My fingers trembled, not just from emotion, but from the deep chill of doubt that had started to settle into me like cold water in my lungs. What if it's true? I rubbed my temple, blinking against the sharp glow of my desk lamp. The soft hum of the fridge in the background was the only sound, and it felt deafening. Grief was already enough, but betrayal, that was something else entirely. When the knock came at the door, I flinched. For a second, I thought maybe Linda had followed me, come to twist the knife further, but then I heard a familiar voice through the door. "Liv, it's me, open up, Jessica, my best friend since college, the kind of person who could sense a breakdown through walls." I opened the door, and there she was, in leggings and a hoodie, holding 2 coffee cups and wearing that no-nonsense face that always made me feel like I could breathe again. "Oh, honey," she said the second she saw my face. She walked in like she belonged there, because honestly she always had. She set the coffees on the table and dropped down next to me on the rug without asking. Her eyes scanned the scattered papers before I even started explaining. "Linda handed me these, at the funeral. In front of everyone," I said, my voice raw. "Then Mr. Greaves read a statement that basically said I'm not my father's daughter, and that I don't get anything." Jessica raised an eyebrow. "She handed you legal documents at your father's funeral?" I gave a hollow laugh. "Right after they closed the casket. It was like she was waiting for the last nail before throwing the first punch." Jessica didn't say anything for a moment. She just looked down at the adoption papers, then back at me. "And you believe her?" I hesitated. "She had documents." And the lawyer backed her up. Jessica leaned forward, picked up one of the papers, and turned it in her hands like she was studying a fake designer purse at a flea market. "Olivia, you really think a man who called you his baby girl every single time he saw you, who kept your macaroni art on his office wall until you were in college, would secretly adopt you and never say a word?" I swallowed hard. "It doesn't make sense," I whispered. "But what if it's true? What if I was someone else's? What if he knew and just never told me?" Jessica looked me dead in the eye. "No, I don't buy it, and you shouldn't either, not until we've seen where this paper trail really leads." I stared at her. "You think the documents are fake?" "I think Linda's a snake in heels," she said without hesitation. "And I think grief makes people do ugly things, but she's always been threatened by you." I blinked. "Me, why?" "Because he loved you more," Jessica said simply. "And she knew it." That made something in my chest twist. I looked down at the photo on my end table, a picture from my college graduation. Dad had his arm wrapped around me like I was the center of the universe. The ache in my ribs grew sharper. "What do I even do?" I asked quietly. Jessica didn't miss a beat. "We start digging. If there's truth in this, we'll find it. And if there's a lie," she trailed off, eyes narrowing at the papers. "Then we'll burn it down, brick by brick." I nodded slowly, my hands still gripping the edge of the adoption decree. Somewhere deep inside, something was shifting. Not quite hope. Not yet. But the weight of helplessness had started to move just a little. Jessica reached for one of the coffee cups and passed it to me. "We're going to figure this out, Liv. One document, one memory, one step at a time." And for the first time since the funeral, I believed her. The car was quiet except for the soft hum of the heater and the occasional hiss of the tires over the rain-damp road. Jessica sat beside me, flipping through a manila folder, occasionally tapping something into her phone. I kept my eyes on the highway, knuckles white on the wheel. "You okay?" she asked, not looking up. "No," I said, "but I'm doing it anyway." That earned a small nod from her. Support without pressure, that was her gift. The address had been listed on the corner of the adoption decree. Hope Haven Home, 223 Long Meadow Road. I'd stared at it for hours before finally deciding I had to see it for myself. I needed to know if it existed, if it ever did. "Hope Haven," Jessica repeated. "Sounds like a place they send orphans in Victorian novels." I smirked in spite of myself. "Or a rehab center that also sells bath bombs." She grinned. "Exactly, you sure it's even still around?" "Only one way to find out." We turned off the highway and followed a cracked 2-lane road lined with overgrown brush and rusting fence posts. The GPS went silent 3 miles back, and there wasn't another car in sight. I kept glancing at the printed page with the address in the passenger seat, like the words would rearrange themselves and offer me a way out. But they didn't. Jessica adjusted the heat, rubbing her hands together. "You ever remember being here, like anything, a sign, a building?" I shook my head. "I was 7 when those papers say the adoption happened. But all I remember is living with Dad. Nothing before that. No flashbacks, no old photos." Just birthday parties with balloons shaped like dinosaurs and his terrible pancakes on Saturdays. Jessica paused. Liv, have you ever considered maybe he didn't adopt you? I blinked. What do you mean? She looked at me carefully. What if Linda made it up, like faked the paperwork? What if this place never had anything to do with you? I didn't answer. I didn't want to say it out loud, but the idea had haunted me since the moment Linda shoved those documents into my hands. Either I was never his, or I was his, and someone was trying to erase me. Both options hurt. I turned down the last road listed on the printed map. It was barely paved, full of potholes, and wound between gnarled trees that seemed to lean inward like they were trying to hide what was at the end. There. Jessica sat forward, pointing through the windshield. A rusted chain-link fence stood crooked across a gravel lot. Behind it, partially hidden by brambles and vines, was a building, or what was left of one. The roof had collapsed. One side was blackened by fire, its windows gaping open like mouths mid-scream. The front steps crumbled into a sagging porch, and above it, barely visible beneath layers of graffiti, were the faded letters, Hope Haven Home. I parked the car slowly, engine idling. Jessica let out a long breath. Well, it's definitely real. Or was, I whispered. We got out, boots crunching over gravel and wet leaves. A cold wind cut through my coat, but I barely felt it. The gate was hanging open. I pushed it aside and we stepped onto the property. The ground squelched beneath our feet, soggy from last night's storm. Up close, the building was even worse. Entire walls had caved in, beams sticking out like broken bones. Most of the graffiti was nonsense, tags, swears, symbols, but someone had painted a cracked heart in red above the doorway. Beneath it, a single word, left. Jessica took a slow step back. Okay, this place is giving horror movie vibes. I don't like it. I didn't respond. I walked forward, stepping over bricks and soggy newspapers. My heart was pounding, not in fear, but in something closer to grief. What if this really was the place where my life before Dad ended? What if this was where I was dropped off, forgotten, until he came to collect me? I stood in the ruined doorway, trying to imagine myself here. Small. Alone. Nothing came, just the sound of dripping water and the hollow whistle of wind through shattered windows. Jessica came up beside me, pulling her jacket tighter. It's gone, Liv. Whatever it was, it's gone. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. But that doesn't mean the story ends here, she added gently. If anything, this proves something weird's going on. Because if this is where your adoption came from, where are the records? Who signed them? Where's the trail? I looked around again, scanning for anything that might offer a clue, but all I saw were collapsed walls, ash, and rot. I don't know, I said softly, but it doesn't feel right. Jessica reached out and squeezed my arm. Then we keep digging. If Linda's lying, we'll find proof. If she's not, you'll still have the truth. Either way, you won't be in the dark anymore. I nodded, eyes still locked on the ruins. Whatever Hope Haven had been, it wasn't a haven anymore. But it was the first step toward uncovering who I really was. I was staring out my apartment window, nursing a second cup of black coffee that had long since gone cold. The sky outside was flat and gray, matching the way I felt inside. A storm was supposed to roll in tonight, but I had no idea one had already arrived in my chest. That's when I saw it. Mark, my half-brother, the younger of the two golden heirs, pulling out of the driveway of our father's estate in Dad's prized possession, the 1968 cherry-red Corvette Stingray, the car Dad only let me sit in during holidays, the one he kept covered like a relic, polished every Sunday like it was sacred. Now it was Mark's. He revved it once before speeding off like he was late to a frat party. No reverence. No gratitude. Just keys in hand and a smirk on his face. I stood so fast I knocked over my coffee. That car was supposed to be a memory, not a toy, not some prize in Linda's sick little inheritance game. Something inside me snapped. I grabbed my coat, my keys, and the envelope of adoption papers that hadn't left my side since the funeral. I didn't tell Jessica I was going. I didn't even have a plan. Just one thought on a loop in my head. I want what's mine, even if it's just a photo. A sweater, a shred of him she didn't poison. The estate looked different now. Hollow, like the soul of it had left with Dad. The porch lights were off. The once immaculate lawn had a few stray leaves. I rang the bell. Linda opened the door in a silk robe with a wine glass in hand, as if she'd been waiting for someone to interrupt her smugness. Well, if it isn't the family ghost, she said, not moving an inch. Come to haunt the rest of the furniture. I didn't respond. She narrowed her eyes. You have 5 minutes, Olivia, that's it. Or I'm calling the police. Great, I said, stepping past her before she could block me. I won't need 6. She huffed behind me, following close like a mall security guard. Anything you take will be inventoried. If I see you pocket so much as a paperclip, I'm not here for your silverware, Linda. I moved quickly through the living room, heading toward the den dad's space. The air smelled faintly of cedar and lemon polish, like it always had. The leather chair he loved still sat by the fireplace. His books were untouched. And then I saw it, tucked half under the coffee table. A faded blue photo album. The kind that only my grandmother kept, big, bulky, with worn leather edges and a broken clasp. It must have fallen out from the cabinet last time they cleaned. I bent to pick it up, and as I stood, the album slipped from my fingers and tumbled open on the rug. Photos spilled out, dozens of them. Dad as a boy, Grandma at the beach. A candid shot of me, maybe 5 years old, asleep on his chest in a hammock. Then I saw it. A black and white beach photo from the 1950s. My grandmother in a retro swimsuit, laughing at something off camera. Her shoulder was turned just enough to show a dark, oddly shaped birthmark on the back of her shoulder blade. I stared. That same shape, a curved line like a question mark, sat on my own shoulder. A mark I'd had since birth. My dermatologist once called it familial. But no one else had it. No one I'd ever seen. Until now. My hands trembled slightly as I picked up the photo. She had it too, I whispered. What? Linda barked from the hallway. Nothing, I said quickly, slipping the photo back into the album, heart pounding in my ears. A flicker of something, fury, maybe, or adrenaline rose inside me. If that mark ran in his family, then maybe I did too. And if that's true, then those adoption papers were worth about as much as the wine Linda kept drowning herself in. I stood up straighter. You've got 1 minute, Linda snapped. I'm done, I said, heading to the door, clutching the album like a lifeline. That's all I needed. She didn't stop me, probably thought I'd taken some old scrapbook out of sentiment. But as I got into my car and closed the door, I couldn't stop staring at that photo. My grandmother, her birthmark, my mark. And a possibility that hadn't dared show its face until now. If I share blood with her, then I shared blood with him. I didn't know what I was going to do next. But for the first time in days, I knew why I had to keep going. Back home, the weight of the photo album in my lap felt heavier than its pages could explain. I sat cross-legged on my bedroom floor, the rest of the world shut out by drawn curtains and the low buzz of a space heater by the window. The house was still, but my mind was anything but. The worn cover of the album creaked as I opened it again, slow and deliberate, like I was entering something sacred. I hadn't touched this since I was a teenager, back when family meant comfort, not questions. I turned each page gently. The plastic sleeves crinkled as I passed decades of family memories, Christmas mornings, birthday cakes, faded Polaroids of Dad helping me build a treehouse when I was 10. But my fingers stilled when I reached the photo. That photo. Grandma Vivian at the beach, toes in the sand, laughing at someone off camera. She looked so young, so effortlessly radiant, her dark curls pinned beneath a wide straw hat, but my eyes weren't on her face. They were on her shoulder, the left one, exposed in a halter swimsuit. There it was, a dark, curved mark just under the bone, same size, same shape, same spot. I reached up slowly, pulling the strap of my tank top down and twisting just enough to glance in the mirror. There it was on me too. A crescent birthmark I'd always assumed was just random. It wasn't random. That's my mark, I whispered. My fingers hovered just above the photo, tracing the line of her shoulder. My heart pounded in my chest like it was begging me to wake up. This couldn't be a coincidence. I reached for my phone, snapped a picture of the old photo, then took a selfie of my own shoulder for comparison. Lined them up side by side. Identical, same shape, same location. A biological fingerprint passed down like a secret. I leaned back against the wall, staring up at the ceiling. If Grandma Vivian had the mark and I had it, that meant she and I were connected by blood. And she was Dad's mother. I sat forward, the pieces clicking faster now. If Grandma was my biological grandmother, then how could I not be Dad's daughter? The adoption papers said otherwise. But this birthmark didn't lie. I opened my laptop and typed into the search bar, "Are birthmarks hereditary?" Dozens of results popped up: medical journals, articles, parenting forums. I clicked through them, scanning. Some birthmarks, especially pigmented ones, can be inherited. Location and shape can repeat across generations. I leaned back, goosebumps rising on my arms. If Linda faked the documents, if she somehow had these papers forged, that would explain everything. The sudden reveal at the funeral, the timing, the cruel delivery. Mr. Greaves had said the documents were authentic, but maybe he hadn't looked close enough. I opened a new search. Atlanta Document Examiner, Private Investigator. I didn't know what I was looking for yet, but I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The birthmark wasn't just proof of something physical. It was proof of a lie. I'd believed I was abandoned. Illegitimate, a mistake taken in out of pity. But now I saw the first thread unravel. This wasn't about loss anymore, it was about theft. Linda had stolen something, my place, my name, my truth, and I was going to take it back. Not for the money, not for the house or the car or the estate. For him, because if I was his daughter, I had every right to mourn him out loud. No more silence. No more letting Linda rewrite the ending. I closed the album slowly and set it beside me like it was a sacred artifact. Because maybe it was. I didn't know how I was going to prove it yet. But I knew exactly where to start. The office smelled like old paper and worn leather, comforting in a strange, institutional way. I sat in a squeaky green chair across from a desk covered in magnifying tools, UV lamps, and stacks of manila folders that had clearly seen decades of secrets. "Garrison," the man across from me said, adjusting his tortoiseshell glasses, "I don't take many walk-ins, but your message got my attention." I offered a nervous smile. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to call first or just show up with a folder full of lies. That earned a short laugh. "Well, you've come to the right place then. Let's take a look at the problem child." He reached across the desk, and I handed him the envelope, the one Linda had practically flung into my hands after Dad's funeral. He opened it like he was disarming a bomb. "I need to know if these are real," I said quietly. "Adoption papers, supposedly from 1998. They say I'm not my father's biological daughter, that I was adopted from a now-defunct orphanage." But I hesitated, pulling out my phone and sliding it across the desk. The screen showed the side-by-side photo comparison, my grandmother's birthmark and mine. "There's evidence that suggests otherwise." He looked at the screen for a beat longer than I expected, then back to the papers in his hand. "I see," he murmured. Then to my surprise, he smiled slightly. "Miss Garrison, I've been doing this 37 years. You'd be amazed how many people think they can outsmart paper." He set the first page under a flat light and flicked on the UV. The room shifted into a quiet blue glow. My heart thudded as he leaned forward, holding a magnifying lens in one hand and a pencil in the other. I waited. And waited. The silence felt like static building in the air. He tilted his head slightly, brows drawing together. "Huh. Huh as in good huh or bad huh?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. He didn't look up. "Interesting choices." Then he pulled the paper closer, pointed to a faint signature at the bottom. "This ink is too fresh for 1998. Pigment age doesn't match the stamp date. Not even close. Probably printed within the last 5 years." I blinked. "So they're fake." "Very clever forgeries," he said, nodding. "But yes, fake." My breath left me all at once. I wasn't sure if I was going to laugh or cry. "She lied," I whispered. "She actually lied. She faked legal documents at his funeral to cut me out." Mr. Deeks sat back, watching me. "It happens more than you'd think. But this isn't amateur work. Someone knew how to layer stamps, age edges, even replicate a seal. But you know what gave her away?" He pointed at the font. "This typeface wasn't even in use until 2007. A baby detail, but a loud one." I stared at the papers like they'd personally betrayed me. "So what happens now?" "I'll prepare a full report," he said, "with a detailed breakdown of every inconsistency. Paper source, ink analysis, stamp age, signature overlay. You'll have something solid in your hands by the end of the week. Admissible if it comes to that. Admissible, court, inheritance, my father's name." I felt the blood rush to my ears. "Miss Garrison," he said more gently now, "I don't know what your stepmother was hoping to gain, but if this was an attempt to erase you, she failed, badly." My throat tightened. I nodded. "Thank you, I needed someone to say it, to confirm I wasn't crazy." "You're not," he said, packing the papers into a secure folder. "You're the daughter of a man who clearly loved you. Someone just wanted that love to look less permanent on paper." I stood, legs shaky but steadier than they'd been in weeks. As he handed me a receipt and a business card, he added, By the way, people don't fake adoption papers unless there's a lot of money on the table. I paused in the doorway. There is, he nodded once. Then buckle up. If someone's willing to commit forgery, they're probably not done lying yet. I walked out into the cold, early spring air with the kind of clarity that only comes after weeks in the dark. Linda had lied. And I was finally starting to build the truth with evidence. The Atlanta precinct wasn't what I expected. It was quieter. No shouting, no dramatic clacking of keyboards, just a hum of quiet tension and the occasional buzz of a phone. Fluorescent lights flickered faintly overhead. I sat in a stiff plastic chair across from a woman whose expression gave absolutely nothing away. Detective Marla Brooks. Mid-40s, pressed shirt, sleeves rolled up just enough to show she got things done. Her eyes, dark, clear, rested on me like she was studying a file even before she touched the one in front of her. I passed the envelope across the desk. This is everything. The forged adoption papers and a full forensic analysis by Mr. Deeks, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He's a certified document examiner with over 30 years of experience. She didn't respond right away. Just opened the file and began reading in a silence that made my skin itch. I sat still, fingers clasped tightly in my lap. The weight of it hit me again. How surreal it was to be here in a police station reporting my own stepmother. But I couldn't back out now. I'd made it this far. After a few minutes, Marla let out a slow exhale through her nose. Deeks knows his stuff, she muttered, flipping to the page that showed the analysis of the ink, the mismatched paper stock, and the telltale error in the typeface. These are not original documents. I swallowed. So she faked it. That's enough to open a case. Marla leaned back in her chair and finally looked me in the eye. If this report holds up, and I have every reason to believe it will, then yes, this is criminal fraud. And if these documents were used to interfere with a legal inheritance, she whistled softly. Your stepmother's in deep trouble. A strange mix of relief and fear rushed through me. I didn't want to believe it, I said quietly. But she shoved those papers into my hands at my father's funeral. Of everyone, said I wasn't his daughter, that I wouldn't get a dime. Marla's face didn't soften, but she nodded slightly, a signal that she understood. And you're saying your father never told you anything about being adopted? Never, not once, and I have a birthmark identical to my grandmother's. I think that paperwork was a cover-up, a way to disinherit me. Looks like you might be right, she said, scribbling a note in her pad. I'm going to need to speak to Mr. Deeks directly. Then I'll bring this to the DA's office. Her pen stopped. But Olivia, she added, her tone sharpening just slightly, I need to warn you, cases like this, they get messy. Family, money, death, people do stupid things when they think no one's looking. So if there's more beneath the surface, it's going to come out. And it might not be pretty, I nodded. I'm not looking for revenge, I just want the truth. She studied me for a second longer, then closed the file and stood. All right, let's get started. I was making tea when my phone rang. Unknown number, I almost didn't answer, but something in my gut told me to pick up. Olivia Garrison, the voice on the other end asked. Yes, it's Detective Brooks, you might want to sit down. I didn't sit, I gripped the edge of the counter so hard my fingers ached. What is it? There was a pause on the line too long. We executed a warrant this morning. On your stepmother's lawyer, Benjamin Royce. I blinked. Wait, Royce, the family attorney. The one who stood next to your stepmother during the funeral reading, yes. We had reason to believe he was involved in the concealment of legal documents relevant to your father's estate. My mouth went dry. You found something, another beat. We recovered a will, a legitimate notarized, dated will, sealed in an envelope hidden inside a false panel in Royce's office cabinet. I couldn't breathe. And, I whispered. And it names you, she said, as the sole heir. The words didn't land all at once. They came in fragments like broken glass, sole heir, will concealed. He left it all to me, I said numbly. Did my dad say why? There's a handwritten letter attached. We haven't authenticated it yet, but it's in the same envelope. From the tone, it seems he updated the will shortly after his last hospital stay. I leaned against the wall. So she knew, Linda knew. We believe so, Marla said. But here's the thing, you were legally entitled to see this will upon his death. Royce was obligated to submit it to probate court. Instead, he buried it. Literally. I closed my eyes. My chest was tight. Anger and grief swirled in equal measure. All this time I thought I'd been erased, but my father, he hadn't forgotten me. He'd tried to protect me. He'd trusted the wrong people. Why would Royce do this? I asked. Was it just for Linda? Hard to say right now, she replied. Could have been financial incentive, could have been pressure, but Olivia, the case just got way messier. I swallowed hard. Messier how? There was a pause, then a subtle shift in her voice, a caution I hadn't heard before. When people start hiding wills, faking legal documents, and stealing estates, things escalate quickly. Royce is already talking, trying to save himself. And based on what he's said so far, your stepmother may have had help from more than just him. My stomach turned. Like who? We're looking into your half-siblings' involvement. There's suspicion that they were aware of the will, possibly even helped pressure Royce to conceal it. No, I whispered, but I knew better. I had seen them smirking at the funeral, seen Mark driving the Corvette like it was already his birthright. They knew, I said, voice low. I can't confirm that yet. But Olivia, Marla added, voice firm now, this isn't just about probate anymore. It's fraud, conspiracy, possibly obstruction. And if what Royce gave us checks out, your stepmother could be facing prison time. I let the words settle over me like cold rain. Should I be worried? I asked quietly. There was a silence. I think you should be careful, she said. Because if they know this is unraveling, they might not go down quietly. The courthouse smelled faintly of dust and nerves. I sat near the front of the courtroom on the plaintiff's side, hands clasped tight in my lap, a thin sheen of sweat clinging to my palms. It didn't matter how much I told myself I was ready. My heart was still racing, drumming like a warning. The double doors creaked open behind me. I didn't turn. I didn't have to. I could feel their entrance like a drop in barometric pressure. Linda walked in first, heels sharp against the tile floor, dressed in a navy blue suit too polished for mourning. Her pearl earrings glinted under the fluorescence like tiny teeth. Her two children, Mark and Miranda, flanked her like bodyguards, equally overdressed, equally smug. Mark was already grinning. They made a show of their presence, settling into the defense bench with little whispers and cocky glances toward my side of the room. Miranda actually pulled out a travel-sized perfume and sprayed the air in front of her as if the courtroom itself were beneath her. I stared straight ahead. My attorney, Ms. Crane, leaned toward me with the calm of someone who'd gone to war and returned with receipts. Don't let them get in your head, she said softly. Arrogance walks in loud, truth walks in patient. I gave a small nod, unable to speak. Instead, I reached into my purse and wrapped my fingers around something soft and familiar, the photo of Grandma Vivian at the beach. That little mark on her shoulder, the same one I'd carried all my life, it was more than a coincidence now. It was proof. It was blood. I kept the photo close, tucked between my fingers like a prayer. Linda glanced over at me and smiled. A slow, poisonous thing, as if I were still the little girl who needed her permission to speak. But I didn't look away. Her smile faltered. Ms. Crane took a folder out of her briefcase, laying it in front of us. Today's just preliminary, a lot of scheduling and paperwork. The judge may ask a few questions, but the bigger battles come later. I'm ready, I said, even if my voice was smaller than I wanted. We have Deeks's report, the forensic breakdown, and now the will. That's an avalanche of evidence. All we have to do is hold steady. At the defense table, I watched Linda whisper something to her lawyer, a different one now since Mr. Royce was currently being investigated. Mark tapped on his phone. Miranda crossed her legs and whispered something behind her hand. They looked relaxed, unbothered. Like they still believed none of this would stick. Like they were untouchable. But I wasn't here for performance. I wasn't here to posture. I was here to reclaim my name. A court officer called the case number and everyone stood as the judge entered. I stood 2 taller now despite the weight of everything that had brought me here. And as I slipped the photo of Grandma Vivian back into my pocket, I felt something shift inside me. Not hope. Resolve. I wasn't backing down, not this time. The final hearing felt like stepping into the center of a storm I had been circling for weeks. Everything was laid out now. The lies, the forged documents, the hidden will. It was no longer just my suspicion against Linda's smug dismissal. It was evidence, undeniable and sharp. I sat at the witness table in the middle of the courtroom, hands folded tightly in my lap, as Ms. Crane walked me through each question with calm precision. Miss Garrison, she said, her voice even, can you explain to the court your relationship with your father, William Garrison? I looked toward the bench. The judge, a stern woman with reading glasses perched low on her nose, nodded at me gently. Behind her, the state seal seemed to press down like a quiet reminder. This was real. This was law. I inhaled. He raised me. From the time I was a little girl, he was my world. He taught me how to ride a bike. He packed my lunch for school every morning until I insisted I was too old. He called me his baby girl until the last time I saw him alive. A lump rose in my throat, but I didn't let it break me. Whether or not there's a matching DNA strand doesn't matter to me, I added. But I know in my bones I am his daughter. Not just in the way I was loved, but in the way he made me feel seen, chosen, permanent. There was a pause in the courtroom. Silence I didn't expect, heavier than judgment. It felt like acknowledgement. Ms. Crane nodded and moved on. "And are you aware of the will recovered from Mr. Royce's office?" "Yes, I've read it." "Can you tell the court who it names as sole heir?" I looked straight at Linda then. "Me." From the defense table, I heard Miranda gasp. Mark muttered something under his breath that earned a sharp elbow from their lawyer. Linda's mouth was tight, her eyes trained not on me but on the judge. Cracks were showing. Ms. Crane submitted the certified copy of the will to the bench, along with the forensic report from Mr. Deeks, and a comparison analysis showing the forged adoption papers. "Your Honor," she said, "we're not just looking at a case of inheritance confusion. We are looking at an intentional effort to commit fraud, falsify legal records, and manipulate the distribution of a man's estate, all for personal gain." Linda's new lawyer, a younger man with slicked-back hair and an air of scrambling desperation, stood quickly. "Objection, Your Honor, we still contest the authenticity of the forensic report. The chain of custody, denied," the judge said firmly, not even glancing at him. "Mr. Deeks's reputation precedes him and the report has been reviewed. Continue." He sat flushed. That's when Linda stood, ignoring protocol, ignoring even her attorney. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. And was confused at the end. He didn't know what he was doing. He changed that will under stress. We were the ones who cared for him, not her. She didn't even visit him every week. "Mrs. Garrison," the judge interrupted sharply, "you are not permitted to speak unless called upon." "I was his wife," Linda barked. "You think he would give everything to her and nothing to us? She's not even his blood." The judge raised a hand and the bailiff stepped forward. The courtroom stirred. I sat still. Centered, watching Linda's carefully curated mask crumble in front of everyone. "He raised me," I said clearly, speaking out of turn but not out of place. "He chose me. You just married into his life. I was his life." The judge slammed the gavel once. "Order in the court." Mark stood up. "This is bull. Sit down," the judge snapped, her voice ringing through the chamber. The room fell into stunned silence. Even Linda, red-faced, dropped back into her seat with a bitter glare. The judge leaned forward, fingers steepled. "I will take all evidence under advisement before issuing a ruling. But let me be clear, fraud, obstruction, and manipulation of estate proceedings are taken very seriously in this court. If these documents are proven to be forged, and all signs suggest they are, this will have serious legal consequences for everyone involved." She glanced toward me. "Miss Garrison, you may step down." I stood. Not with pride, not with triumph, with clarity. I had said what needed to be said, and the truth was no longer mine alone, it was in the record now. Unshakable, unavoidable. The courtroom was packed tighter than it had been all week. Reporters had caught wind of the forged will scandal, and though cameras weren't allowed inside, the low murmur of anticipation buzzed through the seats like static. I sat at the plaintiff's table, motionless. I wasn't praying. I wasn't hoping. I was waiting. The judge entered without fanfare, just the sharp echo of her heels across the tile. She took her seat, glasses perched low, the expression on her face unreadable. After review of the submitted forensic analysis, supporting documentation, testimony, and the newly recovered will, she began, "The court has reached a decision regarding the estate of William Allen Garrison." I didn't breathe. "The will found in the possession of former attorney Benjamin Royce is deemed valid. It is consistent with legal standards and shows no signs of tampering or coercion. Further, the forensic examination has confirmed beyond reasonable doubt that the adoption documents previously presented were fraudulent in origin, constructed with materials and ink inconsistent with their stated date." A collective gasp rippled through the room. I heard Linda suck in air like she'd been slapped. The judge continued, steady and final. "This court hereby declares Olivia Dawn Garrison to be the rightful heir and sole beneficiary of the estate of William Garrison, in accordance with his last will and testament." Every muscle in my body felt suddenly weightless. "Additionally," the judge said, turning her gaze to Linda. This court recommends a full criminal investigation into the fraudulent documentation and the deliberate concealment of legal material. Charges may include forgery, fraud, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and interference with the probate process. Mark stood so fast his chair toppled behind him. "You've got to be kidding me." "Sit down, Mr. Garrison," the judge snapped, her gavel slamming once. Miranda swore under her breath, eyes darting between me and her mother. But Linda, she didn't speak. Didn't move. She just stared ahead, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. Her mouth was slack, shocked into silence. The same woman who had sneered at me beside my father's casket now looked like she didn't recognize the room she was in. Like it had all come undone too fast to catch. I stood slowly, each step deliberate as I crossed the aisle between us. She blinked up at me as if she expected me to gloat or scream or slap her. But I didn't. I leaned in close, just enough for her to hear. "You tried to erase me," I whispered, voice steady. "But I was his daughter all along. And now, everyone knows it." I didn't wait for a reply. I turned, walked out of the courtroom, and didn't look back. Behind me, the room erupted in murmurs. I heard my name, I heard my father's name, but I didn't care what they were saying. All I cared about was the weight that finally lifted from my chest. I had been buried under their lies, and I had dug myself out. The study still smelled like him. Faint leather, old books, and that subtle cedar scent he always carried on his sweaters. I sat at his desk, my desk now pen in hand, not rushing. The sun filtered through the tall windows, casting a warm gold over the polished wood and the row of picture frames I'd carefully arranged. One of them was from the day I graduated college, Dad beaming, arms around my shoulders like he never wanted to let go. That smile was mine again. I wrote slowly, deliberately. "Dear Jessica, I would have drowned if not for you. You showed up with coffee, but more than that, you showed up with belief. When I didn't know who I was, you reminded me who he said I was. That saved me." The second note was to Ms. Crane, and the third for Detective Brooks. Just as I signed her letter, my phone rang. Her name lit up the screen. "Detective, they've been indicted," she said without preamble. "Linda and Royce both. Forgery, fraud, obstruction, it's official now." I leaned back in the chair and exhaled. "Thank you," I said quietly. I'm glad my father can rest now, knowing I fought for what he gave me." She didn't speak for a second, then said gently, "He'd be proud." As the call ended, I sat in the silence for a while longer, running my hand along the grain of the desk. This house wasn't haunted anymore. It was home. The dining room glowed with soft amber light, the kind that made everything feel warmer than it was. Outside, the autumn wind stirred leaves across the long front lawn, but inside, laughter curled through the air like music. Jessica passed a bowl of rosemary potatoes to Detective Brooks, who had, surprisingly, kicked off her heels at the door and was now sipping red wine with a quiet smile. Mr. Deeks wore his usual sweater vest, but tonight there was a little sparkle in his eyes that hadn't been there before. I watched them all with a full heart. This was my table now, my home, and I'd chosen every soul at it with care. "To the Haven Foundation," Jessica said, raising her glass. We all followed suit. "To giving people the truth they deserve," I added, and we clinked glasses with a soft chorus of cheers. Later, while the last of the dessert plates were being cleared, I slipped into my office. The door stayed open, just wide enough for the hum of voices to drift in from the dining room. On the wall beside my desk, framed in simple black wood, hung a copy of my father's final will. Next to it, the photograph of Grandma Vivian at the beach. And beneath both sat the album that started it all, worn, slightly crooked, forever sacred. I touched the edge of the frame gently. "He didn't leave me behind," I whispered. "They just tried to bury the truth." And then I smiled, steady and sure. And I dug it back up. That was the end of my story. When Mr. Deeks chose to risk his reputation by calling out those forged documents, he could have easily looked the other way. He didn't owe me anything. But he stood by the truth. Did he do the right thing, or would you have handled it differently? Tell me in the comments. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'd love to share more with you.